Right, so I thought we'd take a look at some useful generics to pick up in time for Silver Age, or, fish out of your chaff, wherever you have it, in a wardrobe, boxes to your left, or, piles on your desk. Either way, pick them up. So, starting off, welcome to Rathe, right? Pummel. Well, I should also say, you can find it in the history pack as well, but yeah, I don't think I necessarily need to explain this too much for anyone who has played with Pummel or has been a Pummel, but yeah, Pummel's a pretty disgusting card that is still available in Silver Age, so it offers a huge amount of disruption to your opponent's next attacking turn, which is very, very impactful in Fab because you draw up at the end of your attacking turn. So not only are you most likely getting some block pieces from your opponent because to pummel, you need to present something decently big at 2 cost or greater, but then you also get a little bit extra damage on top of that, and then if the hit lands, pummel triggers, and that opponent has to discard a card. So yeah, it can be quite the tempo switching card. So definitely pick some up if you're taking, a mid-range to tall deck, right? Anyone that basically attacks comfortably with 2-cost attacks, because this can just be a nice, easy way to regain tempo in basically any of the colors, because while some classes do still have access to a decent chunk of defense reactions are going to be somewhat of a premium, especially good defense reactions with, well, the staples gone, sink below, bait for scene, and then any majestic rarity defense reaction that is normally taken and normally kept out of limited, right? Now, after that, we have Unmovable, also found in Welcome to Rathe and History Pack 1. So, Unmovable can be a really nice card as long as you can effectively use it. So it's good in a decent pitch class, a class that does have a comfortable amount of blues, because what Unmovable essentially becomes as a defense reaction is a 2-card 7, right? As a 2-card 7, that means one of those cards is essentially worth 3 block, and the other card is worth 4 block, giving it above rate value. Now, if you do play it from your arsenal, it then becomes a 2-card 8 block, meaning that the card you're feeding into it and itself is essentially worth 4 on average, making it very, very useful. Now, you do have to comfortably be able to utilize its value, right? So you do have to be against a tall hero, tall class, a tall opponent, someone presenting enough damage where you do get the full value out of Unmovable, but it still has some counterplay, obviously, against attack reaction-based classes, although it can be a little bit more difficult to bait them into doing what they want to do and then get full value out of Unmovable, but it is definitely a very solid defense reaction if you have that pitch basis for it. Now, in terms of Arcane, I've put Null Rune and Spellcraft together because they're both useful in their own sort of way. Null Rune is found in Arcane Rising or History Pack 1, and then Spellcraft is found from Dynasty, but it's also very, very common in a lot of different precon decks. So, Null Rune is you pitch into it to prevent arcane damage, Spellfray is your destroy it to prevent arcane damage. So both are useful in their own right, and similar to Unmovable, Null Rune, more effective the more you're able to pitch into it. So for instance, if you're in a red line aggro deck, so a deck that comfortably takes mostly red cards so that you can just dump your hand, you're not going to get the same value out of Null Rune as a class that has, again, access to more yellows and blues. So that's where Spellfray comes into play, as a way for you to mitigate a little bit of damage and therefore maintain your nice juicy red cards, because they will definitely be worth more as attack pieces or reactions or whatever you're going to actually use them for than pitching them into Null Rune and only getting that one arcane. But arcane will be rampant, so you will most likely want some of these pieces at the very least in your sideboard for those matchups. So again, if you have a comfortable pitch basis, you want Null Rune. If you're a bit more of an aggressive deck, just trying to dump your hand, then Spellfray can stave off death just a little bit to maybe help you win that game. Now, after that, we have Oasis Respite, found in Uprising. So, Oasis Respite, prevent the next 4 damage that would be dealt to target hero this turn by a source of your choice. If you have less life than each other hero, you may gain 1 life. So if you use this when you have lower life than your opponent, you get that prevent 4 and that 1 gain, making it a 1 for 5, which is definitely pretty nice. Now, overall, it can be utilized by any class, and it can be used against any class, right? Because it's just blanket prevent 4. But again, we go into that pitch basis where you want to be able to do something else along with it. If you're in a red line deck, you're giving 1 card into Oasis to maybe get 5 value, and that's definitely not as exciting as, again, going back to Unmovable, it being a 7 or 8 value. So you really want to be able to then use those extra resources to maybe pitch into something else. So again, in combination with, for instance, the Arcane Barrier or maybe some other costly defense reactions, you'll be able to use those extra floating resources, be it off of a yellow, so 1 resource, or 2 off of a blue, to feed into something else and then get a little bit more value out of this card. So again, if you can comfortably pitch for it and use those resources for other places, it's definitely a nice, solid damage prevention card to pick up. Now, Reinforce the Line. So this is found initially in Crucible of War, but reprinted in Heavy Hitters. So Reinforce Reinforce the Line, target defending attack action card gets +4. So this is really nice in an aggro focus class. You block with one card, and then you use this on top of that attack to give it +4. The Reinforce the Line being a +4 that's usable at different steps of the attack chain is definitely really solid. So it's definitely good against high attack classes where you need that little bit extra oomph of defensive power in response to a pummel. Definitely will do the job. But again, it does have that condition of a target defending attack action. So as long as you are an attack focused class, then you should be able to get the full 4 value out of this. And that definitely does make it at least a solid idea. Now, also from heavy hitters, we have Test of Strength, a 4-block, right? So it's good in high attack classes because of the clash aspect. When this defends, clash with the attacking hero, the winner creates a gold token. A gold token is definitely useful across many different classes, from just the ability to cycle your hand and try to fetch something that's a little bit more useful. Now, obviously, being a block card, doesn't really have much use against arcane damage. But again, we are moving to a format where there's a little bit of a restriction to the defensive capabilities of some classes. Some classes definitely still have access to a wide variety of cards. So this, as a fallback generic 4-block card, is definitely something to at least consider if you need that little bit extra defensive power. Now, from Rosetta, we have Arcane Polarity, right? Our nice 4-value arcane veto in a sense, right? So what doesn't prevent the arcane damage, doesn't stop surge effects, right? So that's if the arcane does more damage than its base, but it's still nice value. So if you are against essentially any class that can hit you with arcane damage, from Runeblade with those one little rune-chant pings to something a bit more fireball-y like Wizard, then Arcane Polarity can be used for its full 4 value of life gain. Again, making it a nice solid card in terms of just edging out the baseline value of most cards across Flesh and Blood, especially in a restricted format like Silver Age. Now, moving on to the Hunted, we have probably the larger cohort of cards, right? The Hunted definitely has a lot of juicy limited stuff, starting off with the Blade Beckoner set. So this is definitely a really useful set of generic equipment. It is essentially worth 2 block value when against a class focusing on weapons. So Blade Beckoner, this gets +1 while defending a weapon attack and guard well. So it starts with 1 block. If you block just an attack with it, the guard well triggers, puts a -1 counter on it, and then if you block a weapon, it'll go up to 2 block, lose 1 block because of the negative counter, and still block 1. So you can get up to 2 block out of each of the Blade Beckoner pieces if you are against one of those split classes that focuses on attacks and weapon swing, so assassin, ninja, maybe not so much warrior, but outside of a few select specific pieces for specific heroes, this is definitely some of the strongest defensive equipment, again, in the correct matchup. Now, also from the Hunted, we have Bunkerbeard, and I don't know why, but I think I'm a little fixated on this card just because it seems like it's really great value. So defense reaction, destroy this. You may add an action card from your arsenal to the active chain link as a defending card. Again, while there are still some defense reactions in play, a lot have now been restricted, meaning that this is your way to get around dominate and attack reactions, which will probably run a little bit rampant within Silver Age as a format, just because there's not as much counterplay as there was in Blitz or, of course, Classic Constructed. So it is good in a action-heavy class because you do need to be able to send an action from your arsenal in order to get its value. Now, in essence, it's worth somewhat of a negative, right? Because you're destroying it and using your card from Arsenal as a defense reaction for its block value. So you're not really getting any other utility or defense value out of the headpiece. So think of it as just at slight negative value, but the flexibility of, again, being able to block with that 1 extra card against dominate or attack reaction. So yeah, it's definitely good in a class like Ranger, for instance, that are looking to Arsenal a card a bit more comfortably than potentially another aggro class that is just fully dumping their hand every chance they get. So it is definitely something to think about and consider as a little bit of a utility piece to, again, play around dominate and attack reactions. Now, also from the Hunted, we have Calming Breeze, right? Shelter from the Storm's little cousin. The next 3 times you'll be dealt to damage this turn, prevent 1 of that damage. So, again, if we focus on its stat value, right, it's a red worth 3, right? So average. But its power comes from the ability of adding that 1 damage prevention to a whole bunch of your other cards. So essentially, if you have a 3 block, along with Calming Breeze, that block is now worth 4. Similarly to equipment pieces, right, you can just add that 1 little extra damage prevention to all those different cards. So against a aggro class, it can definitely come in handy on helping you reach those breakpoints and negate that little bit of damage. So the fact that you can spread out the 3 block of this card across all your different cards rather than, over blocking something is definitely very useful utility. Now, we also have Put in Context. So this is a somewhat interesting defense reaction. So for one, it is a blue 3 block, which is definitely really nice, but you can only defend an attack with 3 or less base power, right? So base power, so a weapon, for instance, is a nice card to use this against, or of course a class that's a little bit on the smaller side, going a little bit wider. So yeah, a defense reaction that also comes in blue and blocks 3 is definitely value in itself, and in the right matchup, definitely gets around its restriction. So with Silver Age opening up a bit larger of a sideboard, right, cards like this may definitely have enough utility to them to be something you comfortably utilize. Similarly, we have Trot Along, so the next attack with 3 or less base power this turn gets Go Again. So the idea being that this is a Go Again piece for one of those classes that put in context would be good against, right? But again, it being a blue 3 block as its base value, so to speak, is definitely solid enough that it comes with enough utility for you to utilize it, maybe near the end of the game, right, just to push that little bit further and try and close out the match. So it's also found in the Hunted. Similarly, so is Nip at the Heels. So Nip at the Heels, target attack with 3 or less base power, gets +1. So again, similar to Trot Along, it's a nice blue 3 block. So either you're using it to block, or you're pitching it and cycling it around. And then when it comes to that late game, it's a nice little push for that 1 extra damage, especially as an attack reaction that can hit weapons or, of course, things with 3 or less base power. So just pushing that little bit extra damage, trying to close out the game, can definitely be nice and useful. Now, lastly, from the Hunted, we have Sound the Alarm. When this attacks hero, they reveal their hand. If an attack reaction card is revealed this way, you may search your deck for a defense reaction card, reveal it, then shuffle and put it on top. So essentially, you get to send a decent value attack, right? A 1 for 5. Take a look at your opponent's hand, which is value in itself, just understanding what they're trying to do for their next turn so they can't sort of bluff or bait you into blocking or messing up slightly. And then if you're against a class that does rely on attack reactions quite heavily, like Assassin or Warrior, you're able to then preemptively plan against that next turn by finding one of your defense reactions and then again salvaging some tempo and trying to then go on the aggressive foot by shutting down their turn a little bit more easily. So definitely good in aggro mid-range that can definitely make use of this type of attack, right? If you're just doing this in your turn, maybe it's not so much worth it, but if you can send a few attacks, a weapon swing, and then into Sound the Alarm to set up that defensive play, it can definitely be solid enough. Now, the last card is On the Horizon, found in High Seas. So similar to Test of Strength, this is just a nice, solid, generic 4 block card, right? So for classes lacking defensive options, this is definitely something you want to have in the back of your pocket to slot into a deck if you do need that little bit extra stat value. It does also come with pseudo op or lesser opt, right? When this defends, look at the top card of your deck. So that does give you a little bit foresight into what you're doing after your next attacking turn. So again, in terms of its stat line and what's being restricted for Silver Age, it's definitely a card to consider. So overall, these are definitely some handy generics to fill out some of the different utility slots on your deck, depending on what you're lacking and what you're going to be up against. So definitely do keep them in mind as you're deck constructing for Silver Age. Now, we'll probably look into class-specific cards, but that does get a little bit more complicated, right? Evaluating what's good in what class and hero, as well as just the fact that there are going to be a lot more cards. But for instance, a little tidbit, if you're looking at Guardian, Guardian has by far the most access to good defensive cards, especially the solid yellow 4 blocks from Guardian Pack Mastery, the clash of equipment, essentially, that most likely won't trigger, but are just there as yellow 4 block cards. That is definitely solid enough, because overall, in Silver Age, you're just looking for that little bit extra value to get you across the line. On that, let me know if I've missed any good cards. That should definitely be in your generic fullback pile for deck construction. Other than that, hope you enjoyed. See ya.